united in diversity. We are very heterogeneous in our opinion.
If we do not renew our partnerships with the rest of the world, Europe will not be relevant.
We can make it if we are together as Europeans.
Do you genuinely believe that countries will manage to reach these very ambitious targets?
Good afternoon, my name is Mathieu Paulet. I am a tech reporter at Politico and you're watching Politico Live, the live extension of Politico's unbiased journalism. So unless you've been living under a rock, you should know that we've got a new European Parliament, 720 new lawmakers, including seasoned veterans and fresh faces, or fresher faces, should I say, that will play a critical role in the next 5 years, especially in the tech policy shaping, in the wake of a flurry of tech laws and with many others up for review soon. But as we look ahead, some crucial questions arise. Does the EU have what it takes to make the most of this new digital rulebook? Do we need to stop legislating to focus on the enforcement of these new rules? Are there gaps to be filled? And how do we strike the balance between fostering innovation and protecting the rights and interest of citizens in digital age? We'll be discussing this and more with our panelists, but first things first, as you're probably aware, we have some housekeeping remarks. I would like to thank our sponsor, GSMA, for making this event possible, and a warm thank you to our audience joining us here or online. We would like to make this event as interactive as possible, so you can participate by tweeting or Xing about it at Live Politico, using the hashtag #DigitalAgendaEU. You know, I'd like to go, sorry, I got mixed up, sorry. We've got so many things to make this conversation interactive. Now I'm going to speak about Slido, where you can ask questions, actually, and this time using the hashtag #DigitalAgendaEU. So you know who we are, so we would appreciate if you would say your name and your organization, so it's transparent for both our viewers and panelists. You can already share your thoughts and answer the following word cloud. You see there have been replies already. The question being, what should be the next priority of the European Parliament in the EU digital policy? We will look at the results throughout the panel. But before we get started, I'd like to invite John Tusti on stage, who is the Chief Regulatory Officer at GSMA. Please, John.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mathieu, and thank you, Politico, for this event. Members of the European Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. It is really my pleasure to welcome you to the GSMA Europe office, both those of you here in person and those of you joining us digitally. It was only 10 days ago that the election of the new European Parliament happened, and I'm really pleased that we're wasting absolutely no time to turn to what I think is one of the most pressing challenges facing Europe today, one that cuts across its full range of ambitions, and that is, of course, Europe's digital future. There is no question that the European Parliament mandate begins at a very crucial moment for the continent on many, many fronts. We find ourselves, obviously, in a geopolitical dynamic that is marked by increased polarization, by trade barriers, by conflicts, and by a global tech race where cutting-edge digital networks, cloud computing, and AI are the determining factors for economic security and for competitiveness. As we look at Europe's digital agenda, I think we need to reflect a little bit today on where Europe's been, where it is today, as we look to where it needs to be. Europe was the undisputed leader in mobile connectivity in the day, demonstrating the transformative power of mobile, not just as a communication tool, but as a pillar of modern societies and economies. And over the years, I think the continent has continued to make some strides in the digital domain, with achievements in safety and fairness in digital markets through the Digital Markets Act, the Digital Services Act, and pioneering regulation in artificial intelligence. And we're really fortunate to have some of the parliamentarians who led on these important pieces of legislation here at this event today. And I think it's fair to say we will very much need your continued legislative leadership as we work together to try to build a better future for Europe going forward. But if we take an honest look at Europe's situation today, in my view, we see far too much complacency in at least some corners. The assumption appears to be that despite all objective indicators to the contrary, that somehow without effort, without radical reform, investment in the next generation networks will just somehow miraculously continue to happen. So I think it's incumbent upon all of us, all of us across the digital ecosystem to do a better job of working with the Parliament, working with the Commission, working with the member states, so that together we take the steps that Europe needs to reclaim its leadership position in digital technology and innovation. Under the current mandate, the European Commission has recognized the strategic importance of the telecom industry to the economy and to the society. The publication of the Commission's white paper on how to master Europe's digital infrastructure sets forth many of the right questions, the questions we need to answer. But it is critical that we move from those words now to actions. And for our part, the GSMA and the mobile operators from across the EU have issued an industry manifesto where we set out our view, our strategic vision for Europe's connectivity sector. What do we see as the key areas for action? First is scale. Building digital networks, it is no mystery that it's CapEx intensive. European operators have got to be able to scale if our networks in this continent have any chance of staying competitive with North America and North Asia. Second, spectrum. We can't have mobile networks without it. And we need to move past the inherent focus on short-term revenue gains and move to more pro-investment models for spectrum policy across the EU that in the end will deliver more long-term benefits to the citizens of Europe. Third is rebalancing. Today's digital landscape looks nothing like it did a decade ago, but the regulatory environment looks a lot like it did. We need to try to close this gap. We need market rules that match market realities. And it's time that we subject equivalent services to the same rules. And we really need to stop de facto in Europe favoring those companies that are not investing in Europe. And finally, enablement. The mobile industry has already been recognized as a global leader in the race to net zero. But we really need ongoing policy support to continue that effort, as well as a recognition of the important role that digital infrastructure plays in enabling the greening of other sectors. So it's clear that we find ourselves, I think, at an inflection point for Europe. Achieving a more connected and innovative continent does require bold action. We very much need a new Digital Networks Act for Europe. And this digital agenda cuts across the political spectrum. If you care about a competitive Europe, digital matters. If you care about a secure Europe, digital matters. If you care about a green Europe, digital matters. And if you care about an inclusive Europe, digital matters. And as an industry, European network operators are committed to working across government with the broader mobile ecosystem and the broader digital ecosystem and other industry sectors so that we have the kind of innovative and connective continent that we need. At the end of the day, the EU institutions and the European mobile industry do share the same goal, which is to realize a connected, competitive, digital, and green future for European society, and to stay in control of our own destiny. But to achieve this, we need to work together, and we very much need to act quickly. And I think this Politico event tonight is an opportunity to get that discussion started, to debate the challenge that lies ahead as we try to secure the digital future for Europe. So thank you all very much, and I look forward to the discussion tonight.
Thank you. Thank you very much, John. A lot to unpack, and to do that, I'd like to welcome our newly re-elected MEPs on stage, please. So let's welcome Andreas Schwab from the EPP and Anna Cavazzini from the Greens. And I understand there is Sandro Gozzi, who's just joined us, is getting mic'd up and is going to join us in a minute. Congratulations on the re-election. Sandro Gozzi will join us in a minute. Oh, please. Sandro Gozzi from Renew Europe. Hello, thanks so much. Thank you so much for your time and congratulations on the re-election. Let's get right into it. We've heard, John, there is a sense of urgency and the timer should be running, but it's not running yet, but it should. So you will all be returning in a slightly different parliaments, one where the hard right and the far right has gained seats. How will it impact, if at all, but you tell me, the negotiation, the policy making, Andreas?
Well, what should I say? I'm very happy to be back, and I'm grateful to be invited here with Politico and GSMA, and also with Anna and with Sandro, because we have been able to steer a lot of projects through the Parliament, and therefore I think we will do it a bit as last time. We will try to set up majorities. To be very blunt, the far-right participation in the European Parliament hasn't changed that much. There was a huge debate about it, and I think we can be proud that it hasn't changed that much. Now the question
There are
is...
still some moving pieces in the
Yes,
puzzle,
but
right?
in the end, if you take the overall, it's 18% of the Parliament. It was before 18%. For me, it's too much, no doubt, but I cannot change it anymore. And therefore, we have to make sure that we get stable majorities, also to boost digital policies that are deeply needed.
Anna, what do you think? Do you think it will have a big change in the way we negotiate files in Parliament?
I think all the three of us coming from the IMCO perspective, so the Internal Market and Consumer Protection Committee perspective, where we always manage to have really good compromises and a very, very good and stable cross-party, cross-group cooperation for the same goals that we all share, that is fair human rights and also, green digitalization, I would say. And we managed, I would also say, quite successfully in the last term to achieve those majorities. I also have a big trust that this will continue. But of course now, right at the beginning, right now, we have the big discussion, okay, are we also able in the European Parliament to have a pro-European, pro-democratic majority that will elect the next Commission president? And there I really hope that especially the key player in this game, the EPP, will decide for the center and not for the far right, because also for digital policy, I have to say, of course, the far right is very problematic, and a lot of the positions are very problematic. So I think also in terms of digital policy, it is important that we stay in the center.
Sandro, will it impact in any way the tech policy shaping?
Well, I mean, first of all, I also hope that we can confirm a pro-European majority at the center, as we've done in the previous term. It is clear that it depends very much, dear Andreas, on the attitude of the European People's Party. Now the campaign is over, so we can talk on an objective basis. It is clear that for us it's a matter of concern whether we decide to have a pro-European majority at the center, and then we, legislation by legislation, we see the EPP to vote with the extreme right. Because for me, I mean, and for me, by the way, as I had the opportunity also to say to Ursula von der Leyen, as a representative of my party during the electoral campaign, the debate, not the debate of Politico, but other debates, for me and for us, ECR and ID are two extreme right groups. We don't see any difference between ECR and ID. The criteria that are used to try artificially to draw a distinction between ECR and ID are artificial because, yes, of course, pro-Ukraine, but then pro-European. I don't see what is pro-European about Meloni and Fratelli d'Italia. Believe me, nothing, except when she must get 200 billion euro from the European budget. Of course, you play by the rules. Would you play by the rules? I would play by the rules too. And the third is the rule of law. I mean, if there is something the ECR has always denied at European level, is the competence, the legitimacy of the European Union to work on your law. Why I'm saying this? Why, when the campaign is over? Because as we say in Italy, there is a proverb, when the pacts are clear, the friendships last longer. So, I mean, I want to be very clear about the pro-European majority, and we want to have a solid program around policy priority. I think it's absolutely possible. We are discussing, and we must go along this way.
Now, at the same time, you will be welcoming a new crop of lawmakers. Some of them are tech-savvy MEPs. I'm thinking of two new colleagues who have previously worked for Meta. My question is simple. Anna, should we let them be involved in files related to online platforms, let's say, I don't know, content moderation?
I think we have constantly improved in the last years our rules in the European Parliament on transparency. And I think it's very important, given also the last scandals we had in the European Parliament. And I think it is very, very important to separate your own personal affiliation from your job as a politician. And for example, also situations in the past where MEPs worked on files where they had huge share of the same company they tried to regulate, I personally find problematic. So I'm really in favor of having very, very clear transparency rules, of implementing them strongly. And
what does it mean? Is that a no? They shouldn't work on tech policy files? Those two lawmakers I'm thinking about here who worked previously for Meta?
I don't know them, but I think if they absolutely get rid of any connections to Meta, you know, if they don't have shares anymore, if they don't sit in any board anymore, if they really make sure that there's no clear connections, you cannot forbid them to work on the files, I think.
Okay. Andreas, any thought on that? Are we welcoming the expertise? Because on the other hand, we could say also that's some...
Well, I'm a bit disturbed of this debate because we don't discuss now about the far right. We discuss about digital policies, no?
Yeah.
So we have to get it right, digital policies. We have to make Europe competitive at global level. And for this, we have to find the majorities. And unfortunately, some parties have lost their shares. And now we have to look for majorities that last for the election of Ms. von der Leyen and for other policies as well. And you can count on me that I'm always looking for the best arguments for the best policies. And I'm confident that we will make them in our committee as in the last 5 years, always very strong on the argument. But what is the key question in digital policies? It's not that someone has been working for Meta. The question is, what can we do in Europe to move our own economy ahead? You are here with a lot of telecom players that have a very strong interest. We are not here to please them, but we believe that resilience of our telecom networks is a key issue that we have to look at. And for that reason, we want to work out also ideas that Thierry Breton, a liberal, with some provocative thesis before the election, has had. Because for sure, the resilience of our networks has to be something that we care much more about. We have seen it, unfortunately, Anna, in Germany with the football matches where people could not get any more their mobiles connected. There is an issue to be fixed, and we need more investment in this sector. But we don't go for protectionism. We want the market to play out, but with better conditions for investors.
We'll get there in a minute. But before that, there is like, we keep hearing like voices in the industry, also in the council, that we also need to take a break on actually legislating and focus and move the energy on the enforcement, on the implementation. Is it the next big priority for the Commission, for the Parliament, Sandro? Implementation, enforcement, instead of new laws?
I certainly think that now we have to focus on two main issues. The first is implementation, the second is investment. On the implementation side, there is a lot to do. On the Digital Market and Digital Market Act, Digital Services Act, political advertising regulation, artificial intelligence regulation. There are implementing delegated acts, a code of conduct that we have to discuss with the private sector, by the way, in which I would think that we should enlarge as much as we can the discussion. Even with other international organizations. I mean, because after all, we are talking about the same issue, digital and artificial intelligence. UNESCO is working on that, OECD is working on that. So I think that in this dialogue that the Commission will have to promote about the implementation of artificial intelligence of the other act, we should be as inclusive as possible, because I think that is really, I mean, a private-public dialogue and that we have to promote. And of course, the issue of investment. From this perspective, the Capital Market Union, this union of saving and investment, must promote it. We must accelerate the works, because it is clear that we must convince investors and private savers to bet their money not only on the New York Stock Exchange, not only Wall Street, but also on digital artificial intelligence investment in the Union. Then we have to see whether we will need to further legislate on specific issues, on dark partner, on some copyright aspect, on some children protection aspect. There might be some more sectoral legislation that might be needed, but I would say that the main approach should be investment and proper implementation and enforcement.
Anna, do you agree? Implementation first, investment, driving investment first?
First of all, I agree with the investment part, but I think then we have to also really explain where the money comes from, and it can be private money via the capital union, but also I see a lot of problems with a lot of member states to go really forward with the capital union. But of course, there's also more or other investment needed, and I think we have to make sure that also on European level we have that money that is desperately needed in infrastructure, in other areas, where I completely agree with. I'm just saying we have to also be honest, and we cannot say, okay, we cut the EU budget, we don't look for new sources of income, where we have a huge investment gap. And there, I think we align. I just wanted to mention it or clarify what you said, I think. Secondly, I'm really not a big fan of this very static debate, no legislation anymore versus a lot of new legislation. I think we need to see where we have gaps, where we have the need. You also, even our host presented a new idea for a new piece of legislation. So just saying, okay, we need an absolute static stop on any legislation, I think is intellectually not really, I think we need to really see where we have gaps. And I see, for example, gaps I'm coming more from the consumer protection digital agenda, not so much from the telecommunication agenda. And this whole digital fairness check that the Commission is preparing, where we also see, okay, are consumers being lured into weird schemes where they then buy stuff on Temu or on Shein or on other weird apps, or do we make sure that our children are not spending 50 hours on social media? So there is, I think, some regulation gaps that we need to address.
Yeah.
And I'm a big fan of looking exactly what we need and then bringing this forward.
What do you think, Andreas, on the implementation enforcement priority? Because like behind those calls, there is also this idea that we've regulated a lot, some would say over-regulated, and that it impairs the innovation capacity of Europe. What do you think?
Well, you have been introducing me as a fresh face. Well, there is also some experience. And
Did
the
I
experience tells
introduce you as a fresh face?
And the
Okay.
experience tells you that every 5 years we have exactly that debate. Every 5 years there's a discussion, should we have more implementation and less? It has never worked. So let's forget about that question. There will be new legislation as well. Yes, because, I mean, the new commissioners want to show their presence. Members of the parliament want to do something. So let's forget
But
about
there are
this
many
debate.
files that have been
But
passed where
but there is for sure a concern that we should take very seriously, that a lot of people feel embarrassed with too many rules. Now, we cannot tell them the world is better without rules. That's not true. But we have to make sure that what we want to achieve with laws is done in the smoothest and smartest way. And I think on this we can work still. There are plenty of examples in the digital context and in telecom contexts. It's quite difficult because we need private investment. To attract private investment, you have to allow for return on the investment. And now we come to the problems, because some people say, no, telecom prices should get cheaper and not more expensive. But if the offer and the services get broader, normally you should also have at least a part of that in higher prices. If not, it will be very difficult to attract as much investment in Europe and in European telecoms compared to Brazil or Argentina or Mexico. And that is a challenge that we have worldwide. And we have to do it very smart and intelligent to achieve that we get more private investment in our public sector, in our telecom sector, in our networks in Europe.
you're all dying to talk about investment, so let's get into it. Telecoms is expected, you've just said it, Anna, telecoms is expected to be one of these policy areas where there might be some policy actions, or at least some wishes for policy action under the next commission. There was an exploratory consultation last year. There is another one going on until next week, asking about so-called scenarios, which laid out idea to bring European networks to the next level. So I don't know how familiar you are with it, but it suggests more harmonization of the rules, a level playing field between operators and tech firms, all sort of action that would actually help unlock much needed investments. Do we need any of that? Do we need the Digital Networks Act that Internal Market Commissioner Thierry Breton called for?
Well, I think that in the light also of the pretty good job, I think that the Commission has done, and will carry on. I refer to the white paper on the telecom sector. There are some issues that we have to tackle, and to see whether and how we have to intervene the issue of
Which issues, yeah?
a fairer competition,
Okay.
update the competition rules in the telecom sector, and ensuring a fairer competition.
Do you have any opinion on whether we need to
No,
update?
it's too early for me to take, a public stance on this, but I think that certainly this is a main issue, and we will come up certainly with some proposals renewed, because we think that the issue of competition, updating competition, ensuring competitiveness on the European telecom sector in the global competition is one of the highest priority from our perspective. There is the issue of consumer protection, and there is also the issue of promoting cross-border projects. promoting cross-border projects in terms of a new industrial strategy, but also in terms of infrastructure. So in terms of connectivity, in terms of gaps. I mean, Andreas was complaining, and it happens very often to me when I'm certain part of, one of the founding members, two founding members, France or Italy, the connection is still very bad. And this is the daily experience that any citizen does. But you
is it really bad in France and Italy?
Well, in some rural areas, there are still problems of connectivity in France and Italy. I don't know in Germany, but according to what Andrea was saying about the Eurocar, so you understand that this is totally unacceptable in 2024 in a country that, in a market that is the first market in the world that wants to reduce the gap in terms of innovation, wants to boost its telecom sectors, and we still have this digital gap in terms of territorial digital gap. It's totally unacceptable. And it was also, against the possibility of doing business. So, as I think that competitiveness, to have a much more friendly business approach must be one of the priorities in the new term. And I think that the new configuration of the European Parliament will be in favor of this approach. It is clear that telecom sector, after all, the major reform of telecom sector, if I'm not wrong, back to the 90s, no? So, I think that it's time, the major structure, it's time to see what we have to update and what we have to improve.
Do we have to update anything? Do we need to drive take-up? Do we need to allow more consolidation? What do you think? More consolidation? Do we need to,
I find it interesting that also Letter in his internal market report identified telecommunications as one area where the internal market still has potential to grow together a little bit more, and where we can, when we think it in a little bit more Europeanized way, probably get something out for the EU citizens, but also for the companies. So I think his proposals in this regard are very interesting. More consolidation, I don't know. I think competition is also very important all the time. But I clearly see that there is room for the EU to act. And I personally think the initiative by Thierry Breton is very good. I don't probably share all the detailed proposals he's making, but to get active in this area, I think is absolutely crucial.
So you've just talked about the Enrico Letta's report. So it's just like this. We've got like this increasingly this feeling, of that the next Commission will have a very strong industrial policy flavor. And Enrico Letta's report is just a sign of that. So one of these suggestions, you're probably aware of it, is that the EU should be open to having fewer telecom operators to allow them to build scale, much needed scale. You've heard John, and invest more in the network. Is consolidation the right way forward?
Well, our proposal in our platform for the election was a fully integrated digital single market and also a fully integrated telecom market.
Okay, what does it mean concretely?
It means that operators should be able to reach out cross-border. Okay. At the moment, they have to apply every country individually for a license, and every country prices this license differently. So we will get in touch.
Spectrum licenses, you're talking,
the licenses for the new network bands.
Okay.
So it's every 5-6 years. For 6G, I think it has not yet started. For 5G, the German minister was very happy. 150 million, even more. I think 10 billion. No, and every country tries to leverage the consumers with new license fees. That has to finish. But that will be a strong battle with the member states.
What's
because
the alternative?
if we put that money to the operators, they can grow even with lower consumer prices. But the fact is that member states' ministers of finance try to get the money from there and then complain about the European market not working well. That's not logical. So we believe that we have to create a fully integrated single market where this national leveraging every 5 years for the next band has to finish. And we have really to make sure that we make the market grow itself, but at European level. And this can only work with competition, as it has been mentioned, but competition at European level, not within a member state. Because today you can travel with your Belgian mobile to Italy and you can stay there, But if you stay there forever, you have to give up the Belgian mobile because you will not be served anymore. Because roaming is allowed only over time, but not forever. But maybe for you, Sandro, it would be the best to keep your Belgian mobile, even living in Italy. When you retire, that's not yet possible. And why? Because the Italians are saying these roaming conditions are only applicable, it's the European law, for a certain time, but not eternally, because there is still that price mechanism behind. And on this, we have to go beyond. And if we go beyond, then we can come to a situation where we have 10 or 20 operators at European level, and they will make different offers, and then consumers can choose, and prices will be stable, and investment can come back. That's our idea.
Are there any, so telecoms policy will probably be one the Commission will look into in the coming months and years. Are there any other gaps to feel you were telling us earlier about consumer? I think there is something also to do with digital addictive design that the Greens have been really vocal about it. What would you like to see happen in the next mandate on this?
Yeah, I think I would find something like a Digital Fairness Act interesting. I mean, it probably is even something that the Commission will come up with. I don't know what the digital fairness check will bring, but exactly it could include things like dark patterns, addictive designs, influencer marketing, and it depends, but we got some progress in the Digital Services Act on the whole topic of advertising and targeted advertising, but I also think probably not enough, given also the fact on how also the extreme right is still using social media platforms also to spread their messages, or how much data the platforms are still collecting from the consumers. So I think this issue from the Greens perspective should also be addressed. And then secondly, and this is probably also not such a big surprise coming from a Green MEP, I think we could still do better in combining the digital and the sustainability agenda. There had been some progress, but also you mentioned it, and I'm very grateful for that, that of course you also need a clear political framework in order to help the companies and also create a level playing field when it comes to digital and sustainability. And there I can imagine also basically new legislation coming up, or I see a gap.
Yeah. Do you see any other gaps, Sandro? You were talking earlier, and I was very interested about copyright, which could be also like probably a very lively debate under the next Commission if they were to reopen it.
I think that copyright should be one of the things that we start to think again. It's very difficult even within my group, within my delegation. I think that it is clear that we need a further update, in my view, of copyright rules. And I agree, I would say online gambling is something that is very important. And I agree with the other priority that I just heard from Anna. I mean, targeted advertising, there are room for to do something more, dark partners. I would say that the issue of targeted advertising has been addressed by DSA, by political advertising regulation, but we have to see whether we have done enough. And also we have started to address the issue of influencers. But also on that, there must be something more to do. So I don't say that I want to legislate on all this issue, but trying to answer to your question, what are the specific points which we should verify, and on which we should verify whether we need to do some further work or not. I would say that these are our priorities.
So there is still room for more specific or targeted tweaks in our rulebook. What do you think, Andreas?
Well, for sure, copyright is an issue, especially in the area of AI, where we see that things that have been legislated so far are not perfectly applicable anymore. It's a very complicated issue, but as it's less visible yet to the consumers compared to 7 years ago, it can be easier to do something on it, to make sure that those that have invested or that have their voice don't want this voice to be misused for AI systems, as an example. Secondly, who is against digital fairness? I think no one. The question is then, what does it mean, digital fairness? I think it's a bit unfair that my predecessor in the European Parliament, there were 3 together in one office with one fixed line. Now we have several mobiles and a fixed line. And so the communication effort of people today is much bigger than ever before. this makes you more dependent on these machines, but it makes you also more accountable to people, to citizens. You can have more questions at once, and so we should also frame it a bit. It's true that our society is changing because of digital, and there is a risk of being too much focused on these machines, but unfortunately, a bit more we have to do compared to our colleagues before, because there is also an advantage linked to it. And then I think that we have really to consider on how we make sure that the laws that we have in place now are managed. I know that the Commission is thinking about how to make companies to pay more for their oversight. I think it's a
For
model,
the DMA in particular?
for example, but it's
Would
also...
you welcome the idea of having them contribute?
I'm just finishing my sentence. I think there is a risk that if you have fees as an income, your oversight is less convincing and less strong. In the DSA, there is a more general management that is needed because freedom of speech is a broader topic to be maintained and to be mirrored to a certain extent. In the area of competition, there are do's and don'ts, and there is nothing in between. And if there is something to be done, then it's to apply strong penalties. So we will have to discuss about that. In any event, we need tougher enforcement, because so far it's getting very difficult, and we need people in the Commission. And all this brings us together to the budget, because if we see the different proposals and ideas that are there, in the end we come back to money, and we will have to discuss again with member states about a more general distribution of tasks and a more general distribution of income, because it cannot be, as we have seen with the DMA, that member states say we need this to be done at European level, but we cannot give you any cent more. That doesn't work, because like that Europe will not work.
Do we also need to do more to protect children online? Some EU leaders, and I'm thinking here of French President Emmanuel Macron and Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen, they would like to see the age for an age limit to use social media to be raised at 15. Do you think it's a good idea? At EU level, obviously, they've been calling for this. Do you think it's a good idea, Anna?
I mean, luckily we had also in the DSA, as you know, included in the targeted advertising at least a minor exclusion. So we have already in some parts of the EU legislation a special focus on minors. And I think, yeah, as they're the most vulnerable when they use social media, I think it is absolutely justifiable that they have also, that we have different rules for minors. I think then in detail, if you say what age it should be or how exactly to do it, because you could also say if you're really strict on dark patterns, addictive designs, the influences on all the other parameters, then probably it's not necessary anymore. But I'm in general in favor of having a strong protection of minors online, because we see also a lot of increasing mental health problems and so on and so on. So I think it's important to have a strong focus on them.
Yeah. Sandra, do we need to raise the age limit
I
for social media?
I agree with this proposal. I think that a good part of the mental illness of our kids derives from unregulated and excessive exposures to social media, digital platforms, etc. And I think that that should go hand in hand with a stronger effort on digital education, starting from the primary school, and with digital literacy, both for the kid and the parents. So I think that I mean, we cannot wait further, because the effect, I'm strongly in favor. I think that artificial intelligence and digitalization are the biggest opportunity for the mankind in our time. So, I mean, absolutely positive, but we have also to draw the lesson of the negative side and the impact on children by unregulated exposure to the social network is one of the negative side on which we have to draw lessons. So yes, I support the proposal by Emmanuel Macron.
Do we need to regulate exposure, Andreas?
Well, the question will be, how do you want to achieve this? Do you want then to register your children with their passport at Meta place so that they can make sure that this is a bit the problem on all these debates? In the DSA, we did it with private schemes to understand patterns of people and to protect them indirectly. But protecting people directly would mean that you have to register them. And I don't want to register this. And I think politics will avoid to make this happen. For that reason, this is a very, let's say, difficult debate, because on the one side, we will not at all want clear names being given to these companies. But without a very transparent scheme about passport and age verification, it's very difficult to protect them as it has been wished. So if we put the burden or the power to protect to the companies, we are putting our hands out of the action, because then it's only to private operators. But without that first step of age verification, which has to be very serious, it doesn't work. So I think there is a deficit in our society on this issue. But I think regulatorily, we have not yet found a solution how to attack it.
Can we have a look at the word cloud so we can see? So the question, what should be the next priority for the next European Parliament in the EU digital policy? So it's just behind you, yes. Is it consistent with what you see? We see competitiveness, cybersecurity also. We had a question, because we also had like a spree of cyber files during the last mandate. Is there also room to do more? What do you think? Do you have any take on cybersecurity specifically?
Well, I think that remains a higher priority. We have started to approach it in the previous term, for example, to enlarge the number and the nature of the sensitive infrastructure in terms of cybersecurity protection is certainly important. I think that we have to do more, especially to foster cooperation between the national actors, and there are good experience. I mean, for example, the experience of Viginom in France, this agency which is being very effective to ensure cybersecurity, is a good experience. So we have to see how we can spread the good practices across the Union, because it remains a very sensitive issue, and we still are very vulnerable to attack, to cyber attacks.
Anna, if you were to pick one.
I mean, for me, what stands above all is, of course, the human-centered, because, I mean, yeah, we can talk about all the other different goals, which are really important, like strategic autonomy, data sovereignty. I agree with a lot of them, but I think the overall goal and the red thread of our legislation should be human-centered.
Andreas, are you inspired?
I think it's a very nice picture. I think competitiveness is in the middle. It's only possible to achieve it with investments and sovereignty. And the question will be, how can we manage to be more European in this, without being anti anyone else, but trying to strengthen our own role? And the question will be if we can learn something from the Indian model, for example. They have done it with a lot of open source. The question will be what can the huge investment into chips that we did bring in. So all the smaller points will come back at a later stage, but I think the key is competitiveness, where we have to work on.
Fair enough. I'm afraid our chat is coming to an end, but before we wrap up, I'd like to hear from you, and one more time about your personal ambitions. And what I mean by that we've talked about like the digital priorities, but I'm curious to learn, how are you planning to contribute to this in the next mandate, in the next 5 years, in which committees, in which role maybe are some of you aiming for? Chair of some committees? You tell me. Now is the time. I know you're all super busy with meetings these days, so I know this is being negotiated right now, so let us in.
Well, first of all, I mean, I hope that we will all continue to work in the same committee, because these are two excellent colleagues, very, very competent, very cooperative. So, I mean, it will be a pleasure for me to continue to work with them. If we are all three, we are in the Internal Market Committee. My priority is to think of the global and external dimension. We have to explain and present and possibly promote our model. There is a European model which is emerging on artificial intelligence, on digitalization, the dialogue we have launched with the US, the dialogue we have launched with India, the work that we have started to do at the UN. I would like to focus on this dimension, because I think that we will really reach our goal when we have, at global level, some understanding on the basic choices and on the basic standards.
Anna, would you like 5 more years chairing the IMCO committee?
I would also absolutely love to continue our cooperation in this great committee, where we had a lot of work, but I think, yeah, managed to, as I said at the beginning, really integrate a lot of different political perspectives and try to really also get good compromises at the end. Yeah, and it's not a secret that I also enjoyed very much chairing this very, very nice committee.
Andreas, would you like to keep the cooperation going? You can't say no now because it'd be awkward, but...
No, I mean, in the end, the mandate that our voters have given to us is to make Europe more competitive, to make it defendable with the defense and union that we want to set up. And on these matters, I want to work in whatever position my colleagues will give me.
Okay, that was a smart answer. Thank you. And with that, I'd like to thank I thank you for your time and for the fascinating discussion. Thank you to you, the audience, for joining us, so here or online. And finally, our partner, GSMA, for making this event possible. We'd love to hear your feedback, so feel free to email us about the event at live@politico.eu. And finally, you can check our Politico events website for the latest lineup of all our events happening this year, because you don't want to miss out. I'm being told our Competitive Europe Week kick-starting on October 1st. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time.
We are united in diversity. We are very heterogeneous in our opinion.
If we do not renew our partnerships with the rest of the world, Europe will not be relevant.
We can make it if we are together as Europeans.
Do you genuinely believe that countries will manage to reach these very ambitious targets?